Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. Before we begin, I'd like to express our heartfelt condolences to families of victims of violent attacks over the last few weeks in Nigeria. And those attacks, whether they be kidnappings or gun and bomb violence, are condemnable and should never be accommodated. This week on the program, though, we continue our focus on the war in Ukraine. Russian forces continue to hit hard more than 100 days since the war began on February 24, 2022. My guest on the program is the president of the Nigerian community in Russia. He's also a senior research fellow at the Institute for African Studies Academy of Sciences in Russia. Dr. Maurice Okoli brings an interesting perspective on the war, which he traces back to a domestic crisis between Ukraine's Russian-speaking population and the national government. And how can we forget to hail Her Royal Majesty Queen Elizabeth II following a 4-day celebration of her Platinum Jubilee. That's Diplomatic Channel in a wrap. Let's check in on other discussions in diplomatic circles. We'll be right back. The federal government has felicitated with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II on her Platinum Jubilee. A statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says Her Majesty's reign over the last 7 decades has been remarkable and characterized by great leadership, whose beneficial impact has transcended boundaries beyond the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. The statement describes Her Majesty as an epitome of great strength of character, dignity and wisdom. North Korea's leader Kim Jong also sent a message of congratulations to the Queen in an announcement dated June 2nd, as Britain celebrates her Platinum Jubilee. Britain and North Korea established diplomatic relations in 2000, but the latter is one of the few countries that the Queen, who is also head of state of 14 other nations, including Australia, Canada and New Zealand, has never visited during her long reign. Mr. Kim's message read, "I extend my congratulations to you and your people on the occasion of the National Day of your country, the official birthday of Your Majesty." And among many world leaders sending their good wishes, the US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden sent the Queen their congratulations. The Bidens met the Queen in June 2021 during the G7 summit. Queen Elizabeth II has met 13 of the last 14 US presidents, all since Harry Truman, with the exception of Lyndon B. Johnson.
Your Majesty, congratulations on your Platinum Jubilee. For 70 years, you've inspired people with your selfless devotion and service to the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. And throughout your reign, the relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States has grown stronger and closer than ever.
Throughout the years, the joy your visits to the United States have brought Americans and your solidarity with the American people in times of tragedy have deepened the friendship and profound connection between our countries. And Joe and I were so touched by the generosity and welcome you showed to us when we visited you at Windsor Castle last year during our first visit overseas as President and First Lady.
And finally, regional bloc ECOWAS has postponed making a decision on Mali, Guinea and Burkina Faso after its leaders failed to agree on what action to take against the military junta in each of the countries. The region's leaders, however, said they were concerned with the country's deteriorating political and security situations. ECOWAS suspended Mali, Guinea and Burkina Faso after military takeovers and imposed economic sanctions on Mali after officers staged 2 coups in less than a year. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has urged the bloc to consider people living in Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea, whom he said were victims of unconstitutional changes of government and its consequences. It's gone past 100 days since Russia invaded Ukraine, but with the latest attacks on the capital Kyiv on Sunday, it's clear Russia is not done yet. The Ukrainian capital was rocked by several explosions early on Sunday. Air raid sirens had gone off earlier across much of Ukraine, including in the Kyiv region. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko wrote on Telegram. Several explosions in Donetsky and Dniprovsky districts of the capital. Services are already working on site. More detailed information later. Russia's defense ministry says forces had destroyed tanks and other armored vehicles on the outskirts of Kyiv that had been provided to Ukraine by European countries. A statement from the ministry came after the capital was rocked by the explosions. Ukrainian air defenses destroyed one cruise missile around 6 a.m. local time. After identifying incoming missiles, they were the first to hit the capital since late April, when a Radio Liberty producer was killed in a Russian missile strike that hit the building she lived in. Meanwhile, Ukrainian soldiers have been manning their positions in trenches and shelters near Bakhmut in the Donetsk region, despite being under regular fire from Russian troops, in a situation set to be difficult. On Sunday, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that Russian troops have destroyed hundreds of military targets in the continued ground, air and missile attacks. And the Ukrainian side said they have pushed back the Russian troops, advancing towards Bakhmut. The ministry said the Battle of Severodonetsk saw some Ukrainian troops lose up to 90% of their effectiveness, and the Ukrainians have withdrawn towards Lysychansk. Ukrainian troops also placed more than 100 tons of chemicals in the Severodonetsk-based Azot plant, one of the country's biggest chemical works, and the Russian Defense Ministry claimed that chemical contamination might occur if those chemicals hold up tanks were broken. President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Saturday the Ukrainian forces are facing an extremely difficult situation in Severodonetsk, with intense shelling and street combats in progress. He did say in his video message on Saturday that the terrible consequences of the war can be stopped if Moscow ordered its troops to stop fighting in eastern Ukraine. And as the U.S. prepares to supply Ukraine with those longer-range missiles, President Vladimir Putin once again warns the West that Russia would strike new targets if the supply went through. President Putin did not name the targets, but said the fuss around Western weapons supplies to Ukraine were designed to drag out the conflict. Ukraine has been seeking multiple rocket launch systems, such as the M270 and M142 HIMARS, to strike troops and weapons stockpiles at the Russian forces' rear. The U.S. President Joe Biden announced plans last week to give Ukraine precision HIMARS rocket systems after receiving assurances from Kyiv they would not be used to hit targets inside Russia. Her Royal Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's 70 years on the throne has been celebrated all over the world as people witnessed a once-in-a-lifetime event. The epic weekend, a long one for most Britons, was one they would never forget.
The Queen, flanked by her son and heir Prince Charles and two other future kings, waved to cheering crowds massed outside Buckingham Palace on Sunday as nationwide celebrations to mark her 70 years on the British throne came to an end. The 96-year-old monarch had withdrawn from several events during the Platinum Jubilee due to episodic mobility issues. On Sunday, she was greeted by huge cheers, trumpets, and a rendition of the national anthem before retreating inside. It had been 4 days of celebrations interpreted through street parties, military bands, and celebrity appearances, culminating in a pageant on Sunday.
Give it up for Jong!
Inclusive of the gold state coach that carried the Queen to Westminster Abbey to be crowned in 1953. seen in the public again for the first time in 20 years after it was last used at the Golden Jubilee. Even a 150-year-old steam engine, Poplar, was restored for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee.
The importance of the Jubilee to me, I suppose, is partly I'm 70 this year, so it's kind of resonates very much personally and demonstrates, I suppose, the line of solidarity that we've had that takes us back through my youth.
On Saturday, Prince Charles paid an emotional tribute to his mother, Queen Elizabeth, praising the monarch for uniting the nation and continuing to make history during her 70-year reign. He made the remarks at a pop concert that opened with a comic sketch of the Queen having tea with Paddington Bear and tapping out the tune to the Queen anthem, "We Will Rock You," on her china teacup.
I wanted to pay my own tribute to your lifetime of selfless service, in pictures, in words, and in light. You continue to make history. And there was still time for fun amongst the work. We might have been celebrating that Derby winner this evening. Next year, perhaps. But I know what really gets my mother up in the morning is all of you, ladies and gentlemen. All of you watching at home, represented here tonight in this great audience. Your Majesty, who have been with us in our difficult times, and you bring us together to celebrate moments of pride, joy, and happiness. Maybe this year, it really is coming home. You have met us and talked with us. You laugh and cry with us. And most importantly, you have been there for us for these 70 years. You pledged to serve your whole life. You continue to deliver. That is why we are here. That is what we celebrate tonight.
Prince William also addressed the crowd on Saturday, saying his grandmother was an optimist. He did focus his speech on the need to protect the planet.
It's my firm hope that my grandmother's words are as true in 70 years' time as they are tonight. That as nations we come together in common cause, because then there is always room for hope. Tonight has been full of such optimism and joy, and there is hope. Together, if we harness the very best of humankind and restore our planet, we will protect it for our children, for our grandchildren, and for future generations to come.
On Friday, senior members of the royal family joined a congregation of politicians, charity figures and groups the Queen has supported for the National Service of Thanksgiving at St. Paul's Cathedral in London to pay tribute to the sovereign's record-breaking reign. The Queen missed the service due to ongoing mobility issues. The Queen, however, led the lighting of the principal Platinum Jubilee beacon from her Windsor Castle home on Thursday night on the first day of the celebrations. The ceremony saw a carpet of lights passed from Windsor to Buckingham Palace to light up a tree, making up the beacon's centerpiece, while Prince William watched on. A beaming Queen had of course appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace early on Thursday, waving to the cheering crowds massed outside the palace. She held a walking stick and wore a dusky dove blue outfit that she also wore for an official Jubilee photograph, joined by her son and heir, Prince Charles, and other senior royals on the balcony of Buckingham Palace.
We've seen the impact the war has had on not just Ukraine, but on Europe and partners all over the world. Analysts have spoken in favor of Ukraine and for Russia. But when you think how much Ukraine has lost in the war, most condemn the war. Joining me now is President of the Nigerian community in Russia and Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for African Studies, Academy of Sciences in Russia, Dr. Maurice Okoli. He joins me now from Moscow. Dr. Okoli, thank you for joining me on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
What do you make of the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, in Russia, it's not called invasion, it's called special operation. But that's by the way. War is horrible. War is hideous. War destroys communities. War destroys families. War destroys development of social and economic fabric of nations. What is happening in Ukraine is a tragedy for Ukrainian people. It's a tragedy for Russian people. And it's a tragedy for humanity. Nigerians who are residing in Russia, which forms part of humanity, to us also what is happening is a tragedy. What we're arguing all the parties involved is to seek political and diplomatic solution to the problem. There is no alternative. Alternative means edging towards the cliff of the most disastrous war maybe the world will see. You see, Russians and Ukrainians, they are children of the same mother. It's quite unfortunate that at each other's neck. It's incredible. It's unbelievable.
Well, that's what everybody has been trying to do, trying to get Russia and Ukraine on the same table to discuss, to negotiate. The initial reason for this special military operation, of course, was Ukraine trying to join NATO. Was that a justifiable reason for this military operation in Ukraine?
You see, the war did not start when Russia entered Ukraine. It started far back. For so many people who doesn't know, Ukraine is not a mono-ethnic nation. It's more multi-ethnic nation. In Ukraine, you have Russians, you have Ukrainians, you have Poles, you have the Greek, you have the Armenians, you have the Azerbaijans. When Yanukovych, which is the president of Ukraine from southern part of Russia, especially from Donbass, was overthrown. Then came the new government. When that new government came, they started a program called Ukrainization. That Ukrainization, the people in the East did not like it because it affects their language, it affects their way of life, it affects their culture. So they resisted it. And that resistance led to the war that took place in Donbass, where about 14 million people were lost. So it is the inability of the government that came after Yanukovych to manage the balance between different ethnic groups in Ukraine. Normally, the struggle for power is between the western part of Ukraine and the eastern part. And that eastern part of Ukraine is dominated by Russians, while the western part of Ukraine is dominated by Poles and Greeks and Hungarians.
So do you think that Russia has achieved its aim, the denazification of Ukraine, as you earlier mentioned?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not in the mind of people who, set the agenda, what their end game will be. But all what we're praying is that let all the parties get to sit on the table and seek political and diplomatic solution, because there is no other alternative. The way it is going, there might be some miscalculation, misjudgment, and it will escalate beyond what it is now, which is going to be terrible for the whole world.
If I'm hearing what you're saying, this is a domestic issue in Ukraine. And if Ukraine is a sovereign nation, then Russian forces have no reason to be there in Ukraine. If it's going through a domestic crisis, Russia has no reason to be there. But let's talk about, what the messaging is. Sorry, sir. May I finish?
As I said, there are so many factors. It's not only, it can't be only a result of internal issues. There are external issues. There are even external. Let me say one thing. We live in a world where there are few people who decide what happens in it. And this group of people are global decision makers. They are very few, but very powerful. It is unimaginable the insanity they are willing to exhibit in order to protect their own interests. So it's a whole lot of things, geopolitics, economics, so many things involved. It's not about domestic issue. It's internal, external, it's subjective, it's objective. So it's a multifunctional problems.
I understand, but you also understand why nations are also announcing sanctions on Russia, imposing those sanctions on Russia. The EU last week announced a sixth round of sanctions on Russia. So how is the economy doing, and are you beginning to feel the pinch of those sanctions imposed by the EU and by other countries in NATO?
Well, I can tell you, the sanction, this is the first time in the history of the world after the Second World War, such massive sanction was placed in a country. It's massive. It's unprecedented in terms of speed and scope. And from what I know about the sanction, it was meant to achieve two objectives. One is political objectives. The other one is economic objectives. So far, Russia is handling it well. If I might remind you, when the Crimea joined Russia, Russia was sanctioned. So they already had an idea of what was coming. So they were prepared. Not only that, let me take you to the structure of Russian imports from NATO countries. Russian import from NATO countries is about 44%. Out of that 44%, 40% goes to European Union and UK. And then to European, and then the remaining 4% goes to America. But what are Russian importing from Western countries? Many machineries, consumable, clothing, shoes, cars,
So is Russia feeling the pinch of the sanctions?
No, those things that are importing from Russia has alternatives, and they are easily replaceable, and they can be sourced from different countries. So that's what made Russia not to, feel the sanctions so much. Also, you must understand also that the world is not Europe and America. There are other countries who have not keyed into the sanctions, so like China, India, Vietnam, South Africa, and the rest of them. So also that is helping Russia. But when you look at the Russian export to NATO countries, it's about 38%. 35% of them goes to European Union and UK. 3% goes to America. When you look at the structure of those exports, it's mainly energy and energy-intensive industry. These are things you cannot easily replace.
Dr. Colley, thank you so much for speaking with me and for being on Diplomatic Channel. This is where we end the program today. Let me know what you think. Follow me or send a message using any of the social media handles showing on your screen. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.